Abigail, thanks very much for joining us from London. What's your sense in terms of how I guess the pandemic has influenced environmental sustainability?
I think the pandemic has really accelerated that focus on environmental sustainability and in particular on the climate crisis that was already in evidence before. And I think there are a number of reasons for this. Over the last year or 18 months, we've seen an incredible mobilisation of the scientific community in developing vaccines at pace. And we've also seen unprecedented social and economic changes in order to deal with that threat. This has really set out an example of how the world can mobilise together to tackle these existential crises, such as a pandemic or the climate crisis. Now attention is moving to focus on how we can rebuild our economies as we're hopefully moving out of this health crisis phase. And this really represents an opportunity for us to build back better and focus on a green recovery, whether that be focused on renewable energy, low carbon buildings or green transport. The investment community had already been coalescing around this idea that climate risk is synonymous with investment risk. And this has come together with the acceleration of these trends that we've seen through the pandemic to put a real heightened focus on environmental sustainability. And what I think we'll see in the coming years is a move to embracing the opportunity that this represents for real estate and the opportunity that this transition to the low carbon economy represents in the way of the transition to low carbon buildings.
And there's been a lot of focus, Abigail, on social outcomes in real estate. Do you see these as kind of being better addressed going forward?
Well, historically, I think it's fair to say that the S in ESG has probably been a bit neglected by the real estate industry. There's been more focus on environmental and governance issues. The pandemic has clearly shone a real light on the social inequalities that we're facing. And this has accelerated that move towards focusing more on the S. And real estate has a really obvious role in being used to address social inequality. That's directly through the provision of socially useful buildings such as affordable housing, accessible healthcare and education, but also indirectly through the ability to invest in underrepresented areas, underserved communities, and through the economic benefits that can bring and job creation as well. An interesting trend that we've seen is the rise in impact investing. And impact investing is where a social and or environmental impact is held up with the same weighting as an investment return. So the two are given equal weighting and the environmental or social outcome is not subordinate to that financial return. So impact investing is a really unique opportunity for the real estate industry to address social outcomes. And I think we'll see a real rise in impact investing strategies specifically built around real estate solutions in the coming years.
Do you think that the pandemic has put more pressure on the industry, not just to focus on ESG, but also to act on it?
Well, the shift in public sentiment is something that I think has been most apparent throughout the pandemic. So the realities of COVID-19 have really shone a light on the social inequalities that we're facing. And at the same time, I think many people have drawn parallels between the existential threat that's been presented by the pandemic and by the climate crisis. And what that means, I think, is that now more than ever, the wider public expect to see those kind of issues being addressed. They expect to see the government focusing on addressing social inequality, and they expect to see a really meaningful effort to tackle the climate crisis. Undoubtedly, what this will mean is that the regulatory landscape will shift to address these issues, and we'll see a lot of meaningful regulation coming out to push the industry towards the low carbon economy. For those working in real estate investment, this means we must address those stakeholder expectations around addressing the climate crisis and social inequality, and also that we have to come to terms with the new regulatory landscape that we're going to be faced with in the coming years. In practical terms, what this means is that we've already seen a raft of real estate asset managers and REITs announcing their pathways to net zero carbon in recent years. And we'll also see that real rise in real estate strategies explicitly tackling social value.
It's really interesting to see how this will develop, Abigail, especially that impact investment side. Thanks very much for joining us.